She called the cops on me for moving out. Yes, you heard that right. Moving out of my own house. I stood frozen as 5 police cruisers surrounded my property, lights flashing, officers shouting commands, their hands drifting toward their weapons, all because Dana Covington, the president of our HOA in Glenridge Estates, had decided that no one leaves her neighborhood without permission. But Dana made one critical mistake that night. She had no idea who was sitting inside that 5th patrol car. What happened next turned this twisted power game into something much bigger, and the fallout would rock the entire community. Drop a comment below and tell me, where are you watching from? Because what you're about to hear could happen in any neighborhood in America. And what happened next will blow your mind. It all started just 6 weeks earlier, on a morning that was supposed to be the start of something beautiful. I had just received the offer of a lifetime. Benaview Medical Group, one of the largest hospital chains in the state, wanted to lock in a 5-year exclusive contract for organic vegetable supply, enough to transform my small farm stand into a full agricultural business, the kind my late wife, Elena, used to dream about. I remember standing quietly in my backyard, watching the sunlight kiss the edges of the basil plant she had nurtured. In her final months, still growing, still strong, even 3 years after cancer had taken her. Elena had been a registered nurse who believed deeply in healing through food. When she knew her time was short, she made me promise one thing: to keep growing clean, healthy vegetables and never let bitterness poison the soil. So this wasn't just about business. It was her legacy. The minute I hammered the for sale sign into my front lawn, I felt the disturbance ripple across the street. Dana Covington appeared almost instantly from behind her screen door light, a vulture sniffing fresh roadkill at 54. With platinum blonde hair that never moved and designer leggings she never actually exercised in. Dana ran the whole like her own private fiefdom. "Derek," she called out in that artificially sweet voice of hers, the one that always meant war. "Surely you're not thinking of leaving our lovely little community?" I kept my tone calm and cordial as I explained the contract and my need to relocate closer to the farm. But Dana's smile didn't reach her eyes. They were flat, calculating. "Well," she replied, examining her perfectly manicured nails, "I do hope you've read Section 1 for B of our bylaws. You know, the part about property transition regulations." She was bluffing. I'd lived in Glenridge Estates for 10 years and knew those bylaws inside and out. But Dana didn't care about truth or law. She cared about control. And ever since I'd won a small court case against her ridiculous vegetable garden ban 2 years ago, I had become her personal nemesis. She'd called front yard planners eyesores. I'd hired a lawyer, proved they increased property value, and won. Since then, Dana never forgot or forgave. What I didn't know at the time was that Dana had spotted my son, Mason, visiting the day before, still in uniform from his job 3 hours away as a patrol officer. She'd seen the holstered weapon on his belt. She'd taken pictures from her window, and she'd filed that little detail away for later, a weapon of her own, waiting for the right moment to strike. The first hit came less than 24 hours after I listed the house. A bright orange violation notice slapped onto my door. $500 fine for leaving my produce delivery truck parked in my driveway for over 2 hours. A decade in this neighborhood, and that rule had never once been enforced. I paid it, of course. But when Dana strutted up to collect the check in person, I recorded our conversation, just in case. "This is just the beginning, Derek," she hissed, unaware my phone was recording every word. "You think you can just leave? Think again. I know people, important people, and they owe me favors." 2 days later, things got uglier. The buyer, who had shown serious interest in my home, suddenly pulled out, citing disturbing HOA history. Confused, I asked my realtor to dig deeper. What she found made my blood run cold. Dana had sent an email to the entire Glenridge Estates community and to the prospective buyer's agent. In it, she accused me of being a delinquent homeowner attempting to flee thousands in unpaid fines. She included a fabricated list of 49 violations going back 5 years, complete with Photoshop timestamps and falsified photos. The reality? I'd had to minor violations, both for truck parking during harvest season. Her email was a masterpiece of deception, just enough half-truths to seem plausible, and just enough venom to destroy my sale. For the first time in years, I felt the same helpless, White-hot rage I'd felt when Elena was diagnosed. Like I was watching something precious slip through my fingers and there was nothing I could do. But then I remembered her voice from those last hospital days. "Don't fight with rage, Derek," she'd whispered. "Fight with wisdom. Let them dig their own hole while you build something stronger." So I got to work. I documented everything, every lie, every threat, every fake claim. If Dana wanted a war, she was getting one, but on my terms. What I didn't know was that she had already made her next move. That weekend, the moving company I'd hired called to cancel. The manager sounded scared. "I'm sorry, Mr. Daniels, but your HOA president issued a legal threat. Says we need special permits to operate in Glenridge and she'll sue us if we show up." I tried to explain that no such permits existed, that it was pure intimidation. But the damage was done. Dana had succeeded in scaring off the movers, leaving me to pack up 5 years of life by myself. Then came the soft knock on my back door. It was Marisol Vega, mid-40s, petite, dark curls dusted with flour from her morning baking. She owned the bakery on Maple and served on the HOA board. Though she hadn't spoken in a meeting in months. "We need to talk," she whispered, clutching a beat-up notebook. "But not here. Dana's watching. She's got Rick monitoring your house." I'd seen Rick before, always lurking in his white van with blackout tint, sitting for hours like a creep, always watching, always parked nearby. What I didn't know was Rick Talbot was Dana's newest boyfriend, a 50-year-old unemployed security specialist with a history of restraining orders. Now he was playing watchdog for the HOA president. What Marisol told me next chilled me to my core. "She's done this before," she said, voice trembling. 3 other families. Same playbook. Harassment, fines, rumors. Then she pressures them to sell, cheat. Her brother buys the house through some LLC. It's all a setup. Marisol opened the notebook. It was full of records, dates, names, dollar amounts, fake violations, coerced resignations, even threats. "She made me shut down my home bakery 2 years ago," she said bitterly. "Told me if I didn't vote her way, she'd burn it down." Smiled while saying it, like it was a joke. She continued, "But I have 2 years of evidence now, and I'm done being scared." Emboldened by her courage, we came up with a plan. I would continue pretending to move, acting as bait. Meanwhile, Marisol would quietly record everything. Her phone, her car's dash cam, even a body cam hidden in a bakery apron. We were going to build an airtight case, and it worked faster than we expected. The next morning, Dana tried to tow my produce truck. Said it was violating HOA ordinance, again, even though it was parked squarely on my property. The tow truck driver took one look, then burst out laughing. "Mr. Daniels, my wife's diabetic. Your vegetables are the only ones that don't spike her sugar. No way I'm towing you for this crazy woman." Dana screamed, literally screamed. Threats, lawsuits, promises to shut him down. He drove away waving. That evening, she called an emergency HOA meeting. She passed a brand new emergency regulation. No homeowner could move out within 90 days of listing their home. It was illegal. It was insane. But she had the votes from her loyal puppets on the board. Marisol tried to object, was shouted down, but she had been live streaming the entire thing, secretly, to the neighborhood's private community page. And within minutes, over 600 people were watching as Dana screamed at elderly residents, threatened board members, and said the words that would end her reign. "Derek Daniels thinks he can just leave? Nobody leaves Glenridge without my permission." The internet exploded. Comments flooded in under the live stream faster than Marisol could even scroll. "Is this even legal? Somebody call the cops. This woman is unhinged. Does she think she's a dictator?" But one comment made everyone freeze. "Is that a knife in her purse?" Marisol adjusted her phone just slightly, and there it was, plain as day, tucked into the side pocket of Dana Covington's oversized designer handbag. The distinct shape of what looked like a switchblade. The meeting unraveled in real time. Residents began stepping back, board members murmuring nervously, and Dana, suddenly aware that she was being filmed, lunged at Marisol. "Turn that off," she shrieked, voice cracking. "This is a private HOA meeting. You're violating association privacy laws." The irony was thick. Dana, who had been illegally photographing neighbors, recording conversations without consent, and falsifying documents, now crying about privacy. But Marisol wasn't backing down. She'd been trained well by her husband, Officer Javier Vega. She backed toward the door, camera rolling, catching every second of Dana's meltdown. That night, the video hit 10,000 views in less than 3 hours on the community page. Then, someone reposted it to a citywide Facebook group. By sunrise, it had gone viral. But Dana, she doubled down. I woke up to find my entire front yard vandalized. Traitor had been spray painted across my raised garden beds in neon red. Plants I'd been preparing for transplant were destroyed, trampled, uprooted, or simply smashed to bits. The heirloom tomatoes Elena and I had developed over years were nothing but pulp in the soil. And in the center of it all, on my front porch, lay a single blood-red rose with a note. This is what happens to people who betray the community. I felt the ground shift beneath me. I had known Dana was dangerous, manipulative, vengeful, but now I saw it clearly. This wasn't about power anymore. This was personal, and it was escalating. Security camera footage revealed everything. There was Rick, in his usual hoodie and cargo pants, stomping through my garden at 3:17 a.m., spray can in hand, laughing, and just behind him, standing with her arms folded, was Dana, smiling like she was watching a fireworks show. I'd barely begun cleaning up the damage when I got the text from Marisol. Robert, come to the bakery. Alone, now. Bring a notebook. The urgency in her words had me on high alert. I left the garden wreckage behind and drove straight to her shop. She was waiting with stacks of papers already laid out across the flour-dusted counter. I started connecting the dots, she said, flipping through pages. Every family she's ever gone after, every one of them had something she wanted. It went deeper than harassment, deeper than HOA violations. Dana had been orchestrating a real estate scheme, using fear, manipulation, and fraud to force people out of their homes. Then her brother, using shell companies, would swoop in and buy the properties at 60 to 70% below market value. But Robert, Marisol said, voice trembling, it goes even deeper than that. She pulled out a single manila folder and opened it to a page of wire transfers and signatures. She'd been embezzling HOA funds to finance it all. Over $150,000 siphoned off over for years, under the guise of emergency maintenance, legal consulting, and security services. The paper trail led directly from HOA accounts to her brother's LLC, and from there to a real estate portfolio linked to none other than Judge Malcolm Reese. That name hit me like a brick. Judge Reese was notorious. Rumors swirled about shady foreclosures and suspicious case dismissals, but nothing had ever stuck. Now here he was, tied to Dana Covington's campaign of intimidation and control. And guess what? Marisol added, her brother-in-law is a dispatcher at the local PD. That's why every complaint filed against her vanishes. Suddenly, the entire puzzle came together. The immunity, the confidence, the utter invincibility Dana had carried for years. She wasn't just a petty tyrant. She was protected. We need more, I said quietly. Enough to make the protection useless. So we formed a new plan. I would continue pretending to move, keep playing the part of the desperate, embattled homeowner. Meanwhile, Marisol would go deeper. She'd record every meeting, track financial activity, and connect with other victims. We needed one big overreach, one undeniable crime Dana couldn't talk her way out of. It came faster than expected. 3 days later, my produce truck was towed again, this time while I was inside it. Taking inventory, I confronted the driver as he began hooking up the trailer. His face fell when he recognized me. Wait, Mr. Daniels, you run the booth at the farmer's market downtown. I nodded. My mom's going through chemo. Your kale's the only thing she'll eat. I'm so sorry. This is insane. He unhooked the trailer on the spot. Dana showed up 10 minutes later, screaming in the street. Neighbors recorded it. Some even laughed. But Dana wasn't finished. That evening, she pushed through an emergency vote with her puppet board. The new rule, effective immediately. No homeowner may vacate their residence within 90 days of listing, unless approved by the HOA president. Insanity.Marisol recorded the whole thing again. And this time, she posted at live.Dana ranting like a cult leader, shouting at retirees, threatening residents, pacing with wild eyes and an increasingly unhinged tone. And once again the video exploded. Thousands of views, dozens of shares. And something we hadn't expected, former HOA board members reaching out. People who had quietly quit over the years without explanation were finally speaking up. She threatened to have my daughter expelled from her private school if I voted against her. She forced my signature on meeting minutes. She offered to waive my late fees in exchange for support. I couldn't afford to say no. And then came the retaliation. The next morning, I walked out to find my entire utility box destroyed. No power, no water, no irrigation. It was 94 degrees by noon. And without the automated system, my crops began dying by the hour. The tomatoes Elena and I had grown from seed. The basil she planted just 2 weeks before her final hospital stay. The heirloom squash passed down from her grandfather. All withering in the sun. I tried calling the utility company, but the request for emergency service suspension had come directly from the HOA, under the name of a contractor that didn't exist. Another shell company, another fraud. That evening, I stood in my dark, sweltering kitchen with tears in my eyes, holding one of the few surviving tomato seedlings. It still smelled like summer, like her. That's when my phone buzzed. It was Mason. "Dad," he said, voice tight, "I've seen the live stream. This is criminal. You need to report it." I told him what Marisol had uncovered. About the judge, the fake contractors, the dispatcher brother - law. He went silent. "Dad, come stay with me. At least until this is over." "I can't," I replied. "If I leave, she wins. The hospital contract needs the first delivery in 3 weeks. I have to stay." There was a pause. "I'm using my vacation days. I'll be there tomorrow." I didn't argue. I needed him, not just for help, but because I could feel it. We were reaching a breaking point, and Dana was going to do something reckless. She always did when cornered. That night, I wrote a letter to Elena, something I'd done every Sunday since she passed. "My love, they've trampled your garden, killed your basil, tried to rip apart what you built from love and sunlight. But I won't let them win. I see you in every leaf, every root, every whisper of wind in these rows. And I'll keep fighting, with patience, with proof, with everything we believed in, outside." Ricks. Van Idle like always. I gave him a casual wave, then locked every door and checked every window, because I could feel it. Something was coming. The next morning, I woke up drenched in sweat. No AC, no fans, just thick, motionless summer air pressing against the walls of my powerless house. It was 98 degrees by 9 a.m. I stepped outside with 2 jugs of bottled water and began hand watering what little remained of the garden. Most of it was beyond saving. Leaves curled, soil cracked, stems snapped from the heat and dehydration. But I couldn't stop, not yet. That's when Dana arrived. She didn't come alone. Trailing behind her were 3 HOA board members, the most spineless of her puppets, and of course, Rick, her personal goon. She wore oversized sunglasses and a smug grin, holding a clipboard like she was about to conduct an execution. "Derek," she announced, loud enough for the entire cul-de-sac to hear, "this property has officially been deemed uninhabitable by the HOA due to lack of essential utilities. You have 24 hours to restore power and water or face forced eviction proceedings." Behind her, the board members nodded like nervous backup dancers. One of them, Tom Myers, had the decency to look ashamed. I'd helped him fix his garage door during a thunderstorm 2 years ago. Now he wouldn't even look me in the eye. Something inside me cracked. "I lost my wife to cancer 3 years ago," I said, my voice trembling, not from fear, but from grief. She believed in healing through food. This garden was her dream. The basil over there. I pointed. She planted that 2 weeks before she died. Could barely stand, but insisted on getting her hands in the soil. Said it made her feel alive. Dana rolled her eyes. "You're killing what she left behind," I continued, "because I made you look weak. That's what this is really about, isn't it?" Silence. Then Dana's smirk widened. "Save your sob story for someone who cares. You violated our bylaws and you're mentally unstable. Maybe what you need is professional help, not a garden." What she didn't know was that Marisol had been parked across the street, camera rolling the entire time. Within minutes, the video was online. HOA president terrorizes widower, trying to honor late wife's dying wish. The comments came in fast. "This is beyond abuse. I hope someone takes her down hard. Who do we call to investigate this HOA? Then something incredible started to happen. The owner of the local hardware store put up a sign. "We stand with Derek Daniels, free mulch for his farm." The corner coffee shop started buying vegetables directly from me for their sandwiches, and they posted about it on social media. Even the local news picked up the story. HOA president accused of harassment, widower fights. But the most unexpected support came from the very people who'd once stood beside Dana. Former HOA board members who had resigned under personal circumstances came forward. They reached out privately, then publicly. "She threatened my job. She blackmailed me with a forged violation. She said she'd report me for tax fraud unless I voted with her." Dana's foundation was crumbling. But she wasn't done yet. Mason arrived that evening, parking 2 blocks away to avoid Rick's surveillance van. When he walked through the front door, I broke down in his arms. "I'm here now, Dad," he whispered. "We're going to fix this." He stepped out into the garden and surveyed the wreckage, ruined beds, scorched tomatoes, broken irrigation heads. He didn't say anything for a long time, but I saw the shift in his face, the determination, the calm fury, the part of Elena that had lived on in our son. "Mom would be proud of you," he said finally. "Now let's finish what she started." That night, we sat on the porch, planning, but we weren't alone. Rick's van was still out there. Mason spotted him, camera raised, taking photos through the cracked window like some bottom-tier private eye. "He's been sending someone info," Mason muttered, eyes narrowing. "Probably Dana." Suddenly his phone buzzed. He looked down. His face hardened. "Dad, something's not right." He showed me the message. It was from a friend at his precinct. "Someone's been digging into your personnel file, asking about your arrest record, your training evaluations, your service weapon license. Quiet inquiries, but from someone inside." That's when I realized Dana had made a new plan. She tried smears, fines, sabotage. Now she was going after Mason. I grabbed my phone and texted Marisol. "She knows Mason's a cop. Watch for anything weird tonight." Her reply came seconds later. "Rick was asking about him at the whole office. I think something's happening. Be careful." We didn't have to wait long. Just after 10 p.m., Dana's silver SUV pulled up across the street. She sat there, just watching. Then she pulled out her phone and started typing. My phone buzzed. Marisol. "She's calling the cops. Said something about an armed intruder at your house." She pointing at Mason. I barely had time to process it before the night exploded into chaos. 5 police cruisers, lights, sirens, loudspeakers. "Come out with your hands visible. Do it now." Mason stood up immediately, calm, hands raised. "Hi, Dad. Stay still. Don't move fast," he said, voice low. Spotlights from the cruisers bathed our porch in blinding white. I could hear neighbors opening doors, gasping, filming. Then the booming voice of the lead officer. "You drop your weapon and step away from the homeowner." Mason's voice never wavered. "I'm Officer Mason Daniels, badge number 4016, off duty, visiting my father. My service weapon is holstered. I'm reaching slowly for my ID." Then we heard her, Dana's voice slicing through the chaos from across the street. "That's him. He's not a real cop. He's been stalking me. I saw him with a gun." Her performance was unreal. Tears, trembling, full damsel in distress. But one of the younger officers paused. "Wait, Daniels, you're the community outreach guy from Riverside PD?" Recognition flickered across a few faces. Confusion spread. But the lead officer, cautious, tense, kept his weapon raised. That's when another car arrived. Sergeant Javier Vega, Marisol's husband. He stepped out in uniform, badge shining, face grim. "Stand down," he barked. "That's Officer Daniels. I know him personally. You've been played." Finally, the guns lowered. The tension drained like air from a balloon. Dana stepped into view, still wailing. "This is all a setup. They're conspiring." That man threatened me. Rick chimed in too, voice cracking. "He's been sneaking around. I've got pictures. He's dangerous." Sergeant Vega turned toward him. "Oh, Rick Talbot. The name sounds familiar." He pulled out his tablet. "Let's see. Yes, you're under a restraining order for stalking and illegal surveillance, aren't you? Interesting. And you're being paid by an HOA president to photograph residents without consent." Rick turned pale. "That's not what this is." "It's exactly what this is. Vega snapped. Mason stepped forward calmly. Sergeant, I'd like you to see this. He held out his phone. Footage from Marisol. Dana's meltdown. The vandalism. The utility sabotage. The forged violations. The live recordings of Rick trespassing. It was all there. Dana tried one last time. You can't arrest me. I'm the whole president. I've maintained this neighborhood for a decade. But her voice was unraveling. Her eyes wild. And then she snapped. She lunged at Mason. Her hand connected with his cheek in a loud crack that echoed through the stunned silence. Every officer flinched. Mason didn't react beyond a step back. But Sergeant Vega had seen enough. Dana Covington, he said firmly, you are under arrest for assaulting a police officer, filing a false report, harassment, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Dana backed away, sputtering, No, I have rights. I know people. I'll ruin you all. She turned to run and tripped over her own planter. Fell face first into the garden bed she once called an eyesore. Rick tried to run too, but slammed into a sprinkler head and collapsed onto the pavement like a wet cardboard box. It would have been hilarious if it weren't so sickening. To tyrants, crumpled in the very garden they tried to destroy. The image of Dana being hauled off in handcuffs, dirt on her face, designer blouse ripped at the shoulder, screaming about conspiracies, went viral before sunrise. Someone posted the clip to Reddit with the caption, HOA president arrested after calling cops on cop's son, gets owned by her own garden. By morning, it had over 1 million views. But the real storm was only just beginning. Back at the station, Sergeant Vega called me in. We've been investigating Dana Covington for months, he said, placing a thick manila file on the table between us. But your case, your story, gave us the final piece. Then he paused. There's something else. Something bigger. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photograph. It was a picture of Judge Malcolm Reese. I'm guessing this name means something to you, Vega said. I nodded slowly. He's the one tied to the property flips. Dana's brother was working with him. Vega tapped the screen. More than working with, Reese was the brains behind it. As he explained it, everything clicked into place. For the past 4 years, Dana and her brother had been part of a multi-county fraud operation orchestrated by Reese. Together, they manipulated HOA laws, weaponized code enforcement, and created emergency violations that allowed properties to be foreclosed or sold under market. In return, Reese would grease the legal process, fast-track the fake fines, quash homeowner lawsuits, and push through quiet approvals on shady transactions. It was racketeering. Worse than that, it was systemic abuse of every trust people had in the system meant to protect them. And now, it was exposed within 48 hours. Federal agents showed up at my house. One introduced himself as Special Agent Carter. Mr. Daniels, he said as we sat in my kitchen. Your HOA president's arrest triggered something bigger than you can imagine. He showed me a map with red dots to 26 of them, spread across 3 counties. Each of these dots is a home forced into a suspicious sale, all linked to shell companies tied back to Dana's family, and every single one was expedited through a court order by Judge Reese. They'd been waiting for a public mistake, something high-profile enough to justify launching indictments without tipping off Reese's network. Thanks to Dana's little tantrum, the agent said dryly, we've got what we need. Meanwhile, Blennerge exploded. News vans crowded the street. Reporters interviewed neighbors I hadn't seen in years, the same people who'd stayed silent while Dana rolled through fear, now lined up to share their horror stories. She fined me $1,100 because my daughter drew with chalk on the sidewalk. She threatened to report me to CPS because my lawn had dandelions. She said our holiday lights were a disruption to uniformity. One elderly woman revealed that Dana had euthanized her cat, then blamed coyotes, all because she had spoken up during a board meeting. And then there was Tom Myers. He showed up at my house with tears in his eyes. I'm sorry, Derek, he said, clutching his hat in both hands. She promised to waive my late dues if I supported the vote, my wife's in treatment, the bills. I didn't know it would go this far. I put a hand on his shoulder. She controlled people by knowing their pain. I said, you're not the only one. But if there was a hero in this story, it wasn't me. It was Marisol. Her years of documentation, every meeting, every suspicious contract, every time Dana had threatened, bribed, or sabotaged someone, created an airtight case. Investigators traced over $175,000 in misappropriated HOA funds, 47 false violations, 3 forced home sales, 2 of which had gone directly to Reese's portfolio. The civil suits came next. 31 families filed for damages, emotional distress, harassment, fraud. The HOA's insurance company, facing a tidal wave of liability, forced the entire board to resign. A month later, Glenridge held its first Democratic election in over a decade. Marisol was nominated for HOA president by unanimous vote. At first, she refused. "I don't want to become what we just got rid of," she told the packed crowd in the community center. But then something beautiful happened. One by one, neighbors stood and spoke. "You saved my family. You reminded us what a real neighbor looks like. Glenridge doesn't need a queen. We need a leader." The applause was deafening. She accepted, with one promise: no more rule by fear. Her first act as HOA president, she threw out Dana's entire 90-day rule, burned the fake garden ban, reinstated moving rights, and issued public apologies to every homeowner who had been fined under Dana's fabricated violations. Then she held up a bag of basil seeds. "These came from Elena Daniels' garden," she said, "and from now on, front yard gardens are encouraged. Best garden every month gets a community prize." The room roared. It was like watching a wall fall. Not a brick wall, but one made of fear and shame and silent resignation. For the first time in years, Glenridge felt alive. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in ages began trading garden tips, hosting block parties, sharing tools, and my once dead garden, it became a neighborhood project. Tom brought over compost. Sharon from next door offered her teenage son to help rebuild the irrigation. Even the grumpy guy across the street who'd once threatened to call the city over a noisy rooster offered fresh mulch. Within 2 weeks, it was thriving again. The basil plant Elena had started just before her final days. We replanted it right in the center. It took root like it had been waiting for a second chance. One morning, I stepped outside to find Mason watering the beans with a grin on his face. "Guess what?" he said, holding up his phone. It was a letter from Dana, written in prison, on paper that looked suspiciously like a napkin. "I will return and reclaim what's mine." He laughed. "Already forwarded it to Agent Carter. They said it'll make a great addition to her parole file." But it wasn't just funny. It was fitting, because somewhere in a federal penitentiary, Dana Covington was now growing vegetables as part of her work assignment. According to a former board member who got a letter, she's been assigned to the prison garden. Karma's favorite joke, the woman who tried to destroy my garden, now spends 6 hours a day pulling weeds. And what about Judge Reese? He was indicted 3 weeks later. Fraud, racketeering, conspiracy, abuse of office, bribery. He tried to plead ignorance, blamed the HOA president acting alone. But Dana had receipts. She turned over emails, wire transfers, meeting logs. To save herself from a longer sentence, she handed them everything. The judge is facing 25 years. Rick Talbot was sentenced to 18 months for stalking, violating his restraining order, and obstruction of justice. He tried to claim he was just doing his job, but his handwritten spy logs and hidden camera footage buried him. As for me, the hospital contract was saved. Pennaview's procurement director called me personally. "Anyone who can survive what you just went through while protecting organic produce," he said, "is the kind of partner we want." They increased the contract. I used the settlement money from the HOA to expand. Today, we run a community farm, built with help from the very families Dana once harassed. Some of them work the land now. Some donate fresh produce to food banks. And some just come to stand quietly by the basil plant and remember. 8 months after Dana's arrest, I stood in my new greenhouse, surrounded by thriving crops and rows of volunteers. Mason handed me a letter he'd just written to Elena. "She'd be proud," he said softly. And I knew she would. We didn't just win. We grew something from it. The trials came fast. By the time Dana Covington appeared before a federal judge, her face had been on every local news outlet in the state. They dubbed her the queen of HOA corruption. And in that courtroom, wearing a wrinkled orange jumpsuit instead of designer yoga wear, she looked nothing like the woman who once ruled Glenridge Estates with Botox and bylaws. The judge's words were sharp and clear. You weaponize community governance for personal gain. You use fear, threats, and fraud to destroy lives. Your sentence will reflect the cruelty you disguised as leadership. Dana was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison, not house arrest, not probation, prison. She was also ordered to pay full restitution to all 31 civil plaintiffs, nearly $300, zero in damages, and an additional $150, zero in embezzled funds traced through her shell companies. Her brother, who had helped funnel stolen properties into secret portfolios, received 3 years for wire fraud and conspiracy. Judge Malcolm Reese, the most powerful man in the scheme, got the harshest blow, 22 years. No parole. He had tried to cut a deal at the last minute, blaming everything on Dana, claiming he was manipulated. But Dana's emails, phone calls, and ledger notes told a different story, and she turned it all over to save herself from an even longer sentence. Meanwhile, Glenridge continued to bloom, without Dana's web of fear strangling the neighborhood. Things changed fast. MARISOL implemented a new HOA charter, one that required transparency, mandatory community votes, and term limits. She created a new role called resident ombudsman, someone elected solely to represent homeowner complaints, with no connection to the board's voting power. And best of all, the garden club. What began as a few neighbors helping me rebuild Elena's beds became a full-blown movement. Every block now had a garden coordinator. Even the crankiest residents had started planting tomatoes in decorative barrels. We created a seasonal contest, gave out ribbons. Kids planted wildflowers on park borders and sunflower seeds along the walking paths. The HOA newsletter, once a fear-based list of infractions, now featured recipes using homegrown produce. Glenridge became a real community again. And Elena's garden, it had never looked better. People stopped by every day to leave a basil clipping, a little note, or just water the soil. We added a small bench and a handmade sign, planted with love, protected with truth. The night the sign went up, I stood quietly at the edge of the garden with Mason beside me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper. I wrote Mom a final letter, he said, softly. Want to read it? I nodded. Dear Mom, we won. She's gone. The one who tried to kill your garden and ruin Dad's dream. She's behind bars now. And guess what? You've got basil growing in 12 front yards, cherry tomatoes in the church courtyard, and a sunflower named after you by the mailboxes. Dad never gave up, even when he wanted to, even when it felt hopeless. And I didn't just get my father back. I got to watch him become a legacy. Love, Mason. We placed the letter beneath the basil and stood in silence. Sometimes healing doesn't come like fireworks. It comes like roots, slow, quiet, and unstoppable once they take hold. 1 week later, the New York Times did a feature on Glenridge's transformation. How one HOA president nearly destroyed a community, and how a garden saved it. The article quoted Marisol, Mason, even Tom Myers. But the closing paragraph was about me. It read, Derek Daniels, a former produce vendor and widower, now runs a thriving community farm staffed by volunteers and survivors of HOA harassment. His motto hangs over the main greenhouse: what you plant is what you harvest. That quote, it came from Elena. She used to say it every spring, hands in the soil, face in the sun. She meant it literally. But now, it meant something bigger. Justice had been planted in the wreckage of tyranny, and it had grown into something none of us expected. One Saturday morning, as I loaded cucumbers into crates for a food bank delivery, Mason called out from the porch, Dad, you've got mail. He handed me a letter, no return address, scrawled in red ink. I opened it carefully, expecting more restitution paperwork, but instead, it read, I will return. This neighborhood belongs to me. There was a lipstick stain at the bottom of the page. Mason raised an eyebrow. Should we be worried? I laughed. Double quotes, no. But I'll forward it to Agent Carter. He'll enjoy the update. An hour later, I got a reply from the FBI. Thanks. We'll add it to her file for parole review. The lipstick stain was a nice touch. Even the feds had a sense of humor about Dana now. That afternoon, a little girl named Harper from down the street walked up to my garden carrying a plastic pot with something green inside. What's this? I asked. It's lemon basil, she said shyly. My mom said Miss Elena used to grow it. We wanted to bring some over. I felt my throat tighten. That's very kind of you. She said if we put it near the bench, it might help people feel better when they sit there. I knelt down and helped her plant it beside the sign. Then I looked up and saw something I hadn't seen in years. Neighbors smiling, laughing, watering each other's plants. And behind them, Glenridge bathed in gold from the setting sun. There were no flashing lights, no sirens, no clipboard-wielding tyrants. Just peace, just people, just home. If you've ever felt bullied by your HOA, your boss, or anyone who abuses power, remember this story. And remember what Elena used to say, what you plant is what you harvest. Subscribe if you want more true stories where justice blooms from the dirt. And drop a comment. What would you have done if Dana called the cops on your son? See you in the next story.